field plot, our MAC plot to another field so we can have a little bit longer strips, trials of what we did there on the corn. You can see some of the beans over there. We would have took you out there, but there's not enough room to park for everybody. So I didn't cherry pick them. Actually, where's Poe at? Poe, if you want to say anything about the soybeans, Poe picked them out. So, but a lot of interesting things we've seen this year on the soybeans. You know, first we was not going to plant any soybeans on our farm this year. We stayed dry, but we were cool. And my agronomist for DCOP, he said, well, you ought to be planting beans, at least get some of your hills out. And we did, and I'm really glad we did. Beans look really, really good. I'm going to show you some things that we did that on our farm to help our lodging issue. Now, we got hit with a pretty good storm. They're not standing anymore today, but they were standing really, really good yesterday. But first thing we want to, if you guys know some of the talks we were giving out this year, we've seen some things on our farm because after we got into May, we got really dry. We went about 6-7 weeks again on about 4/10 of an inch. And why don't you grab the no-till, Terry, which has been them right there. So these were no-till beans, 35 XF1s, Asgrows. I did not like them because when we were dry, even on 30-inch rows, we were not getting any growth. What I'm saying is we didn't have much of a root growth. Now, for everybody to know, there is zero fertility put on any of my beans that you see up there. So all that is sugar humics. And then we burned them. We'll get into how we burned it back, but from the years of manure or high fertility, you know, we have no commercial fertilizer put on that. But as you can see, as you pull one of them apart, you know, we don't see much branching on them. These were planted about 95,000. When Donnie was here over basically the 4th of July, Donnie Bester, we walked out into these beans and they were 4 nodes behind our conventional beans. Well, when we were going through that drought, actually our conventional soybeans kept growing because of a couple things. When it was so cold, our no-till didn't have roots. They did not make roots. I mean, they were, you can see there's not much there anymore, but they just kind of sit idle. And if you think about it, I'm just saying on my opinion, we lost so much moisture because we did not shade over the in between the rows on our 30 inches. So Terry, grab one of them good ones. These are the ones Poe picked up. But, so these, now granted, this is on some of our best ground. We changed a few things this year, and I'm not recommending anybody to do this across your farm. Test it first, but the field that we had these in, 4 out of the last 10, 12 years, they made 25 bushel beans because they got about this tall and they lodged. So I'm not telling everybody to do this, but I think everybody ought to try it. If you have a lodging issue, we come out and we added Lautus at 1 ounce an acre to these soybeans, and you can see they are actually shortened up. I mean, I don't know how tall they were, but they were standing really, really good for that kind of pod set. So if you have a lodging issue, I'm not saying use Lautus, but there's other things we can do. You know, because we've tried planting thin. These are still planted at, I think we planted them at 70,000. We went up on a hill there that's normally pretty droughty. We didn't spray no Lautus on them, and the beans a month ago were almost neck high. So So I'm not saying go out and spray your whole farm if you have a lodging issue, but think outside the box sometimes. You know, it looks pretty convincing. They're going to make better than 25 bushel beans.
Yeah. As most of you know, Lotus has a corn herbicide.
Yeah.
It's not labeled for soybeans, so these are trials.
The moral of the story is do a little check strip, because it will show you, get the 2 ounce.
How tall was they redone?
Do what?
How tall were they when you burned it back?
They were V3 when we burned it back. So interesting. These on the right, on Terry's right hand, they had 2 ounces of Lotus. You know, so, and we sprayed them. That was before the 4th of July, and you can still see that the leaves are still burned up and
Burned,
chewed up.
puckered, 18 inches shorter than those.
And these they were both on a hill, and these were standing right next to them. These were untreated. So the difference.
2 ounces untreated.
Now, I'm telling you, everybody hear this. I'm not telling you to go out and spray Lotus on your farm for your soybeans, but you know, there's things like that you need to try if you do have a lodging issue. I mean, that's why we quit planting soybeans. We couldn't get them to stand. So now I think we're pretty comfortable on our farm that we're probably going to run more Lotus all the time on especially our higher productive ground, or guys maybe that runs irrigation. That might be something to help shorten them things up, because it definitely worked. But try little, don't do the whole farm first, but pretty interesting on it.
Nobody knows where you're up to on your.
The main stem, there was I think 24, 25 notes on the main stem.
Would Cobra do the same thing?
So we've tried Cobra. The problem with Cobra, we only get about a 7-day burn period on them. Like I said, where we sprayed the 2 ounces, we did think we killed them. I mean, it was 6 weeks from post spring, and they're still all boogered all the heck right now. So that's why I'm saying, if you try the Lotus, start little. All right, everybody hear that. Don't run a whole lot. Find out what you need to run on your own farm. But this was interesting. You know, I like 30-inch rows. I did not pull these. Poe Farmer pulled these, or neighbors. These beans were planted the day after. We planted ours. They were on 15s at 140,000. So I don't know about you, but I think I'd take them other beans over them at 95,000. So you're saving about 50,000 seeds. Now I will tell you, we have to make an extra chemical pass unless we use Lotus. That does a pretty good job to clean it up. But normally where we don't spray the Lotus, we do have to make another trip across the field to spray than our neighbors with the 15-inch beans. Any questions?
Did you spray the Lotus with all your other products as well around that?
So actually I made a special trip for that, just so I would actually have no, what's that I'm trying to say there? I just wanted to see what that would do by itself without adding any other chemical in it, to see what it would do.
Yeah, a couple years ago, we were using higher crop oil with the KTS burn back. Still doing that?
So, no.
Not working.
So we couldn't get it, that last time we had beans, we tried burning it back like 6 times. And if you remember out in the field day, the beans were flat. So now granted, we were kind of dry this year, but I do like what we're seeing on that. We are definitely keeping the beans shorter, because it's the beans are just staying banged up way longer with the Lotus than what we could with Cobra or KTS or ATS, anything like that to burn them back. Any questions?
You didn't spray any Lotus on your no-till beans?
No, because they were so far behind. I mean, we was thinking about this under actually, but I mean, you can see we are getting you know, I'm not saying the branching effect is better, but we are stacking in nodes a lot closer. It would have been interesting to see what we'd have put them on if we'd have ran a 2-ounce rate on our better ground. Now, it could have been worse on the better ground just because of the plant being healthier. And when you shock a plant like that, you can actually do some pretty big damage. That's what I'm saying. When you do it, or if you do it, start out on little amounts first, you know, go a 1/2 ounce, see what it does. But on anything that we have anymore, we're going to add some type of lotus in. When we planted them, we planted all of our beans 2 to 2.5 inches. Remember Donnie was talking when he gave that talk this spring about the 3-inch. I planted 3-inch deep in a spot, but I'm too lazy to walk in the back 40 to go look at them. But we had our decoff field day at Boyd Grain, and where he planted deeper on it, you could definitely see the beans were shorter, and there was 1 or 2 more nodes on the deep planting. So the deep planting, I think, is something that we really need to do. You know, or deeper, the inch. I mean, they're at the Boyd's field day where they only planted an inch deep. I think there was almost 4 nodes difference, and that was last week that we seen them. So I don't think they're going to catch back up with the shallower planting to the deeper planting with soybeans. Trying to think, anything else you guys want to talk about on soybeans?
You said R3, Kevin.
Do what?
You said you sprayed them in R3. How tall are your beans?
So our R3, they were probably 6 inches.
No, not R3.
Oh, V3.
Oh,
V3.
Yeah, that's what I meant. But they were probably 6 inches when we sprayed them. Yeah, that's what I thought.
We'll get one guy in.
Yeah, I thought that's what you meant. But yeah, about 6 inches.
Like,
Now, Donnie can't be here on Zoom, but Donnie wants to see them sprayed a little bit earlier. He'd like to see it, you know, 3 or 4 inches sprayed with that to get the true branching. I got kind of humbled on our soybeans when he was out this summer. Compared our beans to what he has over there. Donnie's beans, we're gonna grab grab 2 of the, not the 2 big ones. Yeah, I just want to show what Donnie's beans look like. And it was kind of neat.
Donnie just has got into Roundup 2 beans. So he's behind a generation or 2 on browns.
So you guys may not be able to see this, but 90% of Donnie's soybeans look like that. He had 2 main stems like that on his soybeans. You know, and that's what he gets to. He said, you know, we got to burn them back and, I mean, basically kill them at that stage. At that, you know, he wants to be at that V3, V4. But my excuse to him was, if I do that, my beans will be flat. They will break. And, but he definitely knows something that we don't, because 90% of his soybeans had 1 stem, and they had 2 big main stems coming out just like that.
Once you touch the seal, wide off soybeans.
Yeah, so question is, has anybody wide drop beans?
Just pass, went down the back,
Make any difference?
haven't seen anything yet, no idea about moving up.
A week ago, so how far? Do what?
About a week, we can have to.
Have to go, so your beans are what, R3, R4?
Yeah.
So did you run boron, a lot of boron in it?
I don't know what was it, environment.
We threw together before we took the buy. I wanted to do it sooner, but you know how that goes. Some other sprayer keeps breaking down, so we won't go into that. But I threw some KTS in there. I threw a micro hands. I wanted to go some boron. I just some Phycoterra and put in some carbon sugar at a gallon each. That's what the notes would be right on spot. But anyways, put that in there. And I just wanted to see through the tissue sample. I'm doing it where I'm doing a tissue sample. I wanted to see how it pulls it up. Really try to filter it out more. I was thinking about putting nitrogen in with it, but we're already at 7%, 6.9. I didn't want to go over that.
So speaking of tissue samples, been talking to Donnie a bunch on tissue samples. And Donnie, he told me he never wants to see our levels of nitrogen above 7. And, we've been basically 7.5, almost 8 the whole year. He's been chewing our butt out for having that. And I'm like, well, we're not adding fertility. And, he said, well, you got to add more molly. So that might be something if we you guys get above 7 on your nitrogen. He wants to see a lot more molly in season, not just on the 2x2, but in season Y dropped. And that would help on the vegetative, which we did not do nothing. Like I said, none of them soybeans has an ounce of commercial fertilizer on them. But this was kind of interesting. You guys compared your soybean tissue samples to your corn. I am carrying really good soybean tissue samples, but my corn is kind of struggling. And I've not figured that out why. You look at that little root system on them soybeans. There's not hardly any nodules on our beans. But like I said, we're still, the big plants there, we're almost 8 on our tissue sample yet on nitrogen. So I can't figure out why corn don't respond to why it don't pull out the fertility that the soybeans do. I mean, our boron on them, without anything on our soybeans, the last test was 138. No boron put on it. So I can't figure that out. I don't know, Jeff, maybe answer a little bit on that, why we can mine so much better
Well, Jeff,
on the soybeans, but it does kind of piss a guy off a little bit. I mean, carrying better tissue samples on the soybeans without doing anything, period, than what we do on our corn. On my soybeans, so them right there, they're down about 1.5 right there. But calcium's climbed, which it should be. Calcium right now is about 2.5 on it. But it was.
Do you think some of that could be your biology, obviously not having to consume and digest the live drop pass?
So, yeah, when we get into corn, we're gonna have a really good talk on what we've seen. A lot of interesting stuff we're seeing. And basically all revolves around how big of a pain in the ass nitrogen is. It screws so much shit up. All the other nutrients, as far as nutrient uptake, nitrogen is just most of our corn now, we're down to we're not talking about corn. We'll get into that later, but it's going to be interesting what we've seen on the soil samples or the tissue samples on the corn for where we had more nitrogen, less nitrogen, and how it affected the PK, everything across the board.
I noticed that you said on your tissue samples, it's funny you said that, all my tissue samples on beans have been just mint across the board. Corn struggle a little more than that. I'm wondering myself, we get such a release from the nutrients from the corn stover, right? Without the extra fertilization, I'm just wondering if your biology is able to convert that over a lot better.
Well, for one thing, I argue with everybody. Guys been in the back group know that I argue all the time about the recommendations of what it takes to grow a bushel of corn. I think their numbers are way off because of the actual pounds of fertility that we actually put out, including the manure for the P and K, is less than half of what the recommendations are. So basically what we're saying is what we think on our soybeans is with us not applying any commercial fertilizer. I think that is why freeing up, that's a year that we don't have salts going into the ground, letting our natural biology thrive that much better. So that's why, why we push humics, gallons upon gallons of humics all that year to help muffin them salts.
One of the things in regards to the comment on boron,
One thing to consider potential, calcium, high amounts of calcium, although it's here in this area have high naturally occurring calcium. If you're putting on lime in front of that corn crop, calcium will tie up more. So, not to get the lime, right? But at the same time, it's good consideration, maybe a fall application versus spring. I know most line goes on in the fall, but right at the crop is very helpful in regards to that.
I agree, 100%, yeah.
Do you think the biomass on these difference has anything to do with what you're seeing on the tissue numbers?
So,
Biomass.
so I know we had a couple questions, I know on corn. And makes a huge difference. So I'm hoping Mother Nature cooperates today. We get to go out in our field day to look at corn, but we got some pretty big stalks out there this year. I mean, them things are monstrous as far as the girth. And guess what? Our tissue samples are off a little bit, but that don't tell the whole sample. I think we get tied up too much on that because we can't weigh the biomass of the stalk when you guys pull tissue samples. You have no idea if it's a stalk that big or a stalk that big. You know, they're just weighing what they got. So yes, our tissue samples are down a little bit from every year, but we have way bigger stalks. So 100%, you know, leaf size don't correlate to actually mass flow into the plant, what's going on in the plant.
We had some side by side this year where on soybeans were treated, the leaves were much bigger than the untreated, but the tissue numbers were better on the
Yeah.
in some of the.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And actually, the beans I planted, not that I know, you know, I finally started to pay attention a little bit to beans, but kind of the same thing you were saying. When the beans were in heavy vegetation and, you know, maybe 2 weeks into bloom, it seemed like our leaves were great big. And now you go into that field and it looks like the leaves are half the size of what they were. You guys notice that? It seems like their leaves are getting smaller. Nobody pay attention, Terry, you see that? So I'm wondering if the concentration, because of the smaller mass, is why some of the numbers are going up. I don't know. Jeff, does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, especially starter fertilizers and things like that, where you're looking at a tissue analysis. It's say 5%, 5%, 10 pounds, 5%, 20 pounds, double the amount of nutrients. You know, this year we found, you know, certain areas, already we've had weight loss. That plant is taking longer than everything. Yeah, you're gonna have smaller leaves, things like that. Living plants is trying to grow, it's trying to figure something out. But, yeah. So when you're evaluating products and everything, I'm sure in regards to tissue analysis, keep in mind the size of those plants, regardless of what I'm talking about. It's percentage, how much of actual material. That's the reason I always tell people we're evaluating plant health, not plant potential. Potential based upon.
And I do apologize. That is Jeff Hagan from Waters Lab. So, sorry, Jeff. But so yeah, I mean, it's like I said, our tissue samples are lower, but you know, I've been in this game long enough. I'm not concerned because I know our plants are actually bigger than what they normally are. So, you know, that's kind of what we're taking into consideration with the numbers. You know, the early corn's going to be decent, but the late corn I think has crazy potential. I mean, in our area, I think this will be 7 years in a row that the mid-May in our area corn on is going to kick the crap out of the early April, mid-April, late April, and early May corn. That'll be 7 years in a row. So, so when you get out to our field or the plot out there, you'll see how important even emergence is. You know, when we planted it, you know, I preach about good weather. The Weather Channel let us down again. You know, we planted it, we got bombarded the next day. They were only calling for an inch of rain. The next week, we get 3.5 inches the next day. So, and you can see, I mean, the corn looks good, but you can see the unevenness and the plants that definitely got behind. You know, the potential is going to be good, but not what this later corn is. And I'll say something on the soybeans. Poe was out there, and this will probably be the only time, and it's not really a red planter's fault. But, and I was going to grab some of the beans. Spacing on soybeans is probably as important, if not more important than corn, from what I've seen. Because where we got them, you know, at that 2.5 inches apart, they look like those. But I run the, what are they, 80 cell on them, on my soybeans, and I'm, you know, planting down to 70 to 80,000, and I got a lot of doubles. And guess what? Where I got them doubles, you know, we got half the beans, probably a third of the beans on that stalk than what we do where we have the good singulation. So spacing has got to be key on soybeans. Big.
Precision. So is it 56?
It's 56, yeah. So that's what we're going to switch to on that. How, if you run the corn cells, how thick can you plant soybeans if you run the corn cells, or do you not recommend that at all? Pretty thin.
Yeah, very slow speed.
Pretty slow.
There you go.
I know Ben Sharon tried it a couple of years ago.
Okay. Do you like it or no?
He's just like road. But he's changed.
Yeah, so that's probably another big thing I gotta work on our farm. You know, I gotta change the equipment. Because we did see, I mean, it's a huge difference on the soybean potential. Because we did drop, our singulation was bad. And I think that probably, you know, going by what we see where they're singulated, you know, there could be 20 to 30 bushel difference just by singulation in the spots in the field where we didn't space very good.
Were you putting humics and all that right into fertile when you plant?
So on the soybeans, I did run sugar and humics in furrow and 2x2. But no other fertility all the way through.
5 gallons each.
No, no, not on soybeans. I think we ran in furrow. We actually ran a fulvic again. You know, that's all we run now anymore on corn, soybeans. So I think we ran a 1/2 gallon in furrow, 1/2 gallon of sugar, and then we come back with I think it was a gallon. No, it was 1.5 gallons and a gallon and a half of humic and a gallon of sugar on our soybean 2x2. So on the soybeans, yeah.
And nothing in furrow.
Yeah, we ran a 1/2 gallon and a 1/2 gallon of fulvic. Right in furrow. We didn't see that. Actually, I kind of forgot about it yesterday. We ran some, we got a trial of soybeans that are untreated. And then the other ones, all these other ones are treated. And I'm saying treated with, what's the, not Saltro, Alivo. And I hate to say this, but the non-treated is probably going to kick the crap out of the treated. So I don't know if that's good, bad, whatever, but I mean, it looks like it's going to be a butt whooping on our farm. But if you think about it, you got neighbors in our area that if they don't run treated beans, their beans are dead about 2 weeks. In fact, the neighbors over there right next to us, their beans are already starting. I think they're getting sudden death on them, even with the what's that word again? The treatment. The Alivo, where they don't treat their beans. I mean, it's a train wreck, and I think that goes back to soil biology. You know, I think if you have healthy soil, Mother Nature kind of helps take take care of some of that stuff. I think, we don't plant a whole lot of beans, so we don't see the pressure a lot of them guys do. It's the first time in 3 years that we had a bean on our farm again. So now them guys are on a 50-50 rotation. So they probably have to have it treated on theirs. So. Trying to think, on the passes of the guys, now this is coming from Donnie. When we was out there, he made a manganese pass. I'm thinking R4 to R5 there. And Donnie said by adding that, I think he ran I'm not a big foliar fan, but he ran a gallon of manganese on there and he's showing a 3 bushel boost. So guys, that might be something late in the game you may just try. I don't know why. He didn't explain it to me. But he said some of you guys need to try a late application of manganese just to see on the soybeans. I'd kind of think it'd be earlier for what manganese does, but some of you guys may take a few strips out there and try that manganese. Any questions on soybeans?
Well, guys, we need to talk about this. Everybody wants.
What do you guys see?
Yeah,
What are you guys
seeing?
doing on, seeing stuff on your
Your
phone?
beans, are they podding better? Are they branching better? Have you dropped the populations?
So when you use the lotus, talk about it later.
I didn't hear what you said.
So the question was, did I knock the cotyledons off on using Lotus? Absolutely. So, so it's kind of, I don't know, maybe I cost myself a lot of bushels because a lot of guys say you got to protect that cotyledon, but it was gone 2 days after we sprayed it. The cotyledon was gone, and I'm not saying we're going to have record soybeans on our farm, but we're going to have pretty good soybeans on our farm. So,
You like to say, at Boyd Field Day this past week, we saw soybeans that had branched out of the cotyledon. And the problem with that branch is it's the longest one. It's probably going to be one you're going to lose. So losing it might not be the worst thing. You might talk about some of yours starting to branch just a little bit too much.
oh yeah, Poe was there. We got a train wreck. Even at 70,000, you can't walk through them, and they were standing. They're just.
Yeah. What you think? Just-
They're going to be fun. Thank God we got a red combine to get through them, but.
It'll be tough, boys.
Yeah.
Where we're from, we don't get nowhere near the height of them. Probably like that. Do you think that would still boost our yield?
Of keeping the cotyledon.
Oh, it's spraying your lot.
Oh, so no, so the reason I do it is to shorten my beans so they stay standing. So it would be interesting to see what your tissues are. If you're, is it water your issue or is it the fertility? If your nitrogen's below, say it stays below 5.5, never gets above 5.5. So there you might be a prime example of maybe adding some nitrogen into your plant. So nitrogen's going to be on your height, but you don't have to have tall beans to grow good beans. You look at them over there that we burned back with Lotus. And I don't know if Lotus is going to promote stacking the nodes. You're going to make you more nodes. Terry, count how many nodes is on there. But see if they're any different than the taller one. But so I don't think that actually promoted more node growth. Probably, if I had to guess, it's probably less, just because it, for 4 to 5 weeks they were kind of down. Do what?
Count down.
23.
23 on the main stem.
Come on,
It's gonna be a hard count.
3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. So 19 on there. Yeah. So like I said, the Lotus is we only use it for one thing, just to back them down a little bit. Terry, check on the ones where we didn't put any Lotus at all on. Just curious if we brought them down any or gained any more or not. The no-till ones would have been. Hell, I don't know. You carried them over there. But anyway, so to answer your question truthfully, I doubt it. I doubt that the Lotus is going to help gain pod set or nodes. We'll just break them all.
Yeah, just break them off.
So there was probably 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. About the same.
No, no difference. But there's not as much.
Yeah, but yeah, there's definitely not as many on here
Cluster.
as what's on them. I mean, a lot of the fertility, my opinion, like I said, I'm just dabbling into soybeans. I think it's a lot like corn boron. In the fruiting stage, you got to have high levels of boron. Kind of like corn, we don't want to see low numbers. We want to be above 40. Soybeans, I prefer to be above 80 on boron, just for the flower fruiting part of it. So I think nutritionally, we can just by boron again, we can raise more nodes or pods on the node, I should say. I'm not saying we can gain more nodes, but we can gain more pod set on the flowers. Well, I'm not on my soybeans, but we got numbers on that too that we want to try to be around, and I think that number on soybeans needs to be above 80. Like I said, I'm learning too, but on the soybean thing, but I, the ones that we do, we got pretty good pod counts where we can maintain that high number.
Do you think you're getting some carryover in your boron from your corn stock?
Oh, 100%. I mean, some of you guys that's been in the group, how many has their beans just gotten better by just from the following the corn program? Yeah, most guys have said that. So just from the carryover from the corn program, the soybean numbers will go up.
Nick's got a question back here.
We can see it this year, like at a 30-inch farm, like 15-inch trees. You can see the 30-inch grower.
Good deal.
Nick in the back.
Yeah.
It seemed like this year and last year a little bit too, the beans just never got going. How much of the pre-bird overlapping residuals is causing soybeans just not? I've always felt like our pre-bird program has to be so aggressive. Seems to be different.
So if you heard Nick say they're asked about, seems like the soybeans have been slow going. We actually talked to agronomists from Kalb about that, and he's noticed it too. But kind of what he said was, if you have water hemp or whatever, he said, just probably what we have to deal with because of exactly what you said. We're running such stout chemicals anymore to control the weed. So, to me, actually, I would just soon stay where they are. I don't want a lot of growth right away, even though we have to make more trips, because I know what happens if they come out of the ground on our farm. If they come out of the ground and take off, they will lodge on our farm. So yeah, but I mean, it's definitely, the industry knows it. the breeders or the guys that work for the seed companies definitely see that, exactly what you're saying. How to fix it?
Don't plant beans.
Well, that's normally what I say. Yeah, don't plant beans, but I don't know. I mean, beans are funny. I mean, like I said, anytime you can deal with a crop that could be in 3 different growth stages, reproductive stages, that's what makes it so interesting. Does anybody play with determinate beans? I just kind of wonder if anybody plants any determinate beans. Nobody? I think we're going to try some just to see, you know. I mean, I know you're taking a kind of a gamble on, you know, when you're flowering and setting pods and this and that, but it's really no different than corn. You know what I mean? So corn, you know, you got kind of like a 2-week window, hit the pollination or not, but just something to think about. Maybe a guy can gain some yield on planting determinate. Yeah. So I planted 1 bean, 35 XF1s. I have no idea. That's why I was kind of curious myself. 5. So we probably won't plant them. Scratch that idea. So,
So I actually do have some determinate beans in Georgia, my farm down there, because it's a real big thing down there. And I just come from there last week, and when I walked my determinate beans, I put it there on 15-inch rows, and obviously I planted them just as thick as I did the other ones, and it's a disaster.
oh, really?
It's a disaster. But I really think the beans are gonna be good. It's just a totally different mindset from what we're used to. I said, you know, the beans are completely chest high, and just now I got flowers on them, you know, and I don't know. I'm just really curious of how they do play out. I do have, I think there's about 50 acres we ended up finishing off with down there.
When you said they were disasters, they tangled up? Or?
Oh, yeah. You cannot even, one thing I did really like about them is the leaf size is huge. It's a huge leaf size compared to what, you know, what we're used to on
There's
anything.
another way of looking at that, less sunlight.
Yeah. So.
And they're on 15s?
15.
How many guys,
Is that what's planted down there, man?
most guys plant 15s?
No, most guys, a lot of guys down there,
36.
36 or 38-inch rows, determined of beans. We harvested a crop for the neighbor there 2 years ago when he had 83 bushel beans on 38-inch rows, determined of beans. But I asked the neighbors around there, and I said, "Has anybody tried this and planted their beans? Because nobody plants beans till we're done planting up here. You know what I'm saying? These guys plant them like really late." And I asked him, I said, "Has anybody tried to plant the beans in March down here?" And that's like unheard of. And I didn't get my determinants planted that early either. It was later when we got them planted. I don't know.
So you got both beans determined, and
I did. Yes.
you'll be able to give us.
Yeah, been every bit of late April when I got the determinants planted.
Yeah, your beans probably come out of the ground roaring. You're probably 80 degrees plus down there.
Well, we were cool and wet this time.
Oh, were you?
So, yes, absolutely. So,
Talk about that. If anybody's-
Well, I mean,
We hope they will.
I'll just tell you, the biggest yield advantage there is, and everybody's pretty well knows this, you got to plant early in our area, you know. Just because of several things, the lodging issue and the bloom set, you know, the flowering. Like I said, that's part of the reason why we had so much struggle with soybeans before. You know, we'd plant all of our corn first, and soybeans was a train wreck then. You know, they'd put nodes 6 inches apart there, and you know, of all the foo-foo juice you can buy, probably that, without a doubt, is the best thing we ever did was move our soybean plant up, thoroughly plant. What else you guys got? Yeah.
What about, for residual? You got to get a lot of pastures.
So every time I spray for beans, I'm throwing a residual in on the 30 inches. So can't remember, we switched it up. We ran 2 different products. Can't think offhand what they were. They were actually the generic. Well, we sprayed, yeah, so we did spray dicamba first, and then we come back in with Liberty. First time I ever sprayed Liberty, actually like it. Actually like it a lot. Yeah, you know it'll kill, won't you? How many acres was that?
Does it kill everything, Cliff?
Do what stage? Depends. Normally whenever we see weeds, you know, no. Not hardly. I mean, so the only time I have really good luck of burning anymore is when we go with a corn herbicide on our crop wall. I mean, like Cobra, like I said, we get burned, but you know, within 4 or 5 days, with Cobra, our beans are out of it, are already turning green. So I mean, if we want to burn them, we're finding out the corn herbicides are working best for us. Well, I mean, I think it's a good thing. I mean, some of the other guys don't think it is, but like I said, I don't know. Depends on what you're wanting. You know, we're trying to turn it back to slow the growth down so we don't get so tall. So I don't know if that's what you're trying to do. Yeah. So, I mean, I don't think, like I said, we kind of showed it there. We really don't gain any nodes by burning them back. So my opinion is if you don't have a lodging issue, I would not burn him back. Anytime you know, try to get as much energy in that plant as you can all the time. But, you know, if you don't have a lodging issue, I would say, no, I wouldn't burn him. I mean, I've not seen anybody come back and say that, oh my gosh, I burned them back and I gained, you know, 6 nodes and 40 bushel not because of the lodging issue, you know, just regular standard straight beans that will stand. I've never heard anybody say that we gained a bunch of bushels by burning them, especially with the chemical. You know, if you do something like with an ATS, KTS or something like that, you might on pod fill, you know, try to get a little potassium in it. You might, but as far as a chemical, probably not, if that's not a lodging issue. No. May actually was going to have a wife go out the lawnmower and try it. Go out there. She likes mowing anyway, so that'd be a good thing for her to go out with a lawnmower and mow them. Has anybody tried the rolling?
Probably out west.
There's people that do it in our area.
That's all I want.
But see nothing out of it? Don't Jimmy,
Heard them, but they don't really see any response.
don't Jimmy Frederick really talk about rolling soybeans?
That they're pushing rocks down.
Yeah, that's basically what they're rolling.
Oh, the rocks,
Just roll rocks.
just roll rocks down.
There's enough stress in there that just
Which
like
does
big.
get the bushes.
Yeah.
Not the worst on the rocks.
So what, anything else on soybeans?
You inoculate them.
Did I inoculate my beans? No. If I would have done anything, I would have probably tried to bring some iron in it, but like I said, I'm no offense, I'm trying to do everything I can to, you know, to keep my beans from growing tall, other than the sugar. And the only reason I ran the sugar and the humics is to jumpstart that biology. I mean, I think the biology, if you guys have been in our group long enough, that's the number one thing we talk about. You know, the biology makes up for a lot of sin. we do a lot of that farming.
I think your non-treated beans, the biology gets into it quicker than the treated beans. Is that why you think it's yielding better? Or?
Well, I mean, yeah, my opinion is yes. Now, I don't know anything about it, but you know, it's just kind of like Xyway. I know some guys use Xyway on corn, but you know, my theory is on that. If we don't have I always like to think that I try to be proactive on disease with foliar fungicides. I like foliar fungicides. But I just sit there and I see, why are we trying to put stuff in the soil that does kill some biology when we're trying to promote it? If that makes sense. So, you know, we spend a lot of money, sugar, humics, fulvics, algae now. We use all these things to promote biology, and I just don't like myself going in there and dampering it and slowing it down. So that's just my opinion.
Makes sense.
I mean, it's amazing. If you got healthy soil, it seems like it fixes a lot of the problems naturally. I ain't gonna fix them all, but you know, and there's you know, if you got history of certain diseases, well, yeah, I mean, sometimes that's what you have to do, you know, go in there and get it before it gets a hold of it. But, you know, then I would just rotate crops several years, stay in the corn or stay in the soybeans, to try to bring those numbers down a little bit. But,
Has anyone ever sprayed Monso, sharp, hard to say? Anybody ever do that?
So the question was, did anybody spray Gramoxone for a harvest date on soybeans or something like that?
Nick's got some.
Nick, how'd it work?
Oh, I mean, only for the reasons of getting manure on, like the lagoon was full, but it does seem that really put a pop on the yield. You have to do it as soon as it starts turning yellow, right in that range where is it gonna be ready, is it not gonna be ready? But if you do it a minute too soon, you're gonna smoke the yield. And if you do it too late, you shouldn't have sprayed it because you're gonna be past your harvest window anyway. It would have been ready. So the only thing that they do is they make it super nice to cut. They cut real easy. But the only reason we ever do it is just because the bead was small and we had to spray.
I did it on some with Sharpman. It's all about 3 bushel.
3 bushel gain?
Yeah, it was just right like he said. I mean, we was watching every day.
Saw a video, this week. I was taking the pod and kind of breaking it in half and squeezing it. You pop the bean out of it. That's what he said.
Yes, you basically take that off the pod, break it open, see right when it disconnects from the bean.
That's when you should spray?
That's when you spray.
Interesting.
I'm gonna try more of it this year and see what happens.
I see the guys down south, Harry Galloway, Matt Miles, them guys there. I know they do a lot of that.
See, I put 4 to 16, like 4.0 is about the so
Okay.
did that help with the yield?
Probably. You think it's because of the just not losing any to branches breaking off, or?
I think a lot of it's the way it's drying. Actually starts to
Lose weight. You what? North Carolina? What are you spraying? Gramoxone? How much? How much Gramoxone? Okay. Now, is there a downfall if you can't cut them right away? Oh, really? Damage damage on the soybean itself.
Start popping out. Might want to forget that idea.
So, when Jeff gets back in here, we sent out a thing on the nitrate test. Mr. Jeff Hagan's gonna come in and talk about that a little bit. I think before lunch here, he'll do that because, we've seen some things, and we'll talk of that in the corn, that was really interesting about nitrogen. And I hope our theory is correct, that we all should be in that 0.5, 0.6 pounds of nitrogen to grow a bushel of corn. Just because of what we see on all the tissue samples where we apply more nitrogen, correlation to the more nitrogen we put out there, every nutrient seems to go down on our. So Jeff, let you talk about it a little bit. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Jeff Hagan. I'm with Waters Agricultural Laboratories out of Owensboro. Know several of you, talked to several on the phone in regards to different services we have to offer. I'm going to get to nitrogen and everything, but feel kind of led to talk about a couple of things, comments that was made. One other thing in regards to the boron, we have to understand going back to that biomass of a soybean versus biomass of a corn plant. Takes a lot less boron to get into that soybean plant in order to get that parts per million that you. If you're ever doing any studies yourself, some people, this is a common question I get. You'll notice on our micronutrients we say ppm as compared to majors and secondaries. We talk about percentage. If you ever want to take that parts per million and turn it into a percentage, if you ever want to do your own biomass study and everything on your farm, you just take that decimal place, move it to the left 4 places, and that'll give you percent. So if you're at 700 ppm, then it's going to be 0.07%. That's the easiest way to think about that. Question was asked in regards to post applications and how that negatively affects how long. Look at your tissue test. If you're not doing a tissue test, I highly encourage you. That tissue test is going to not only be telling you what it's lacking as far as nutrients, but it's not necessarily going to be the cause, but it could be a symptom of something else, such as a post application. And so how long was it not getting into the plant after application? And which brings me to talking about our plant monitoring kits. I know several in the room have already doing that. If you don't know, let me kind of talk about that, what it is, because I think it's a huge tool for your farm. Rather than just taking a tissue test and being a diagnostic piece for that particular time period that you took that tissue sample, this plant monitoring kit is 12 weeks. So you're going to get a kit, you're going to assign it to a field or an area of a field. You're going to go out there every week, same day every week, take that tissue test. Good, bad, or ugly. Good growing conditions, bad growing conditions. If not, how are you going to know what worked, what didn't, what caused what? Remember, once again, it's not necessarily if you're low in something. It may not be because it's low in the soil. It may be because something else, whether it's disease, whether it's an application, whatever the case may be, dry conditions. There's a lot of things that's going to affect that, and that is a good indicator as far as telling the tale for that growing season. Last thing you want to do is be riding in the combine at the end of the season and making assumptions. You truly want to learn what's working and what's not, because with that same aspect of giving you the analysis of each week, it's also an opportunity on that card that's in each one of those bags that you're going to fill out, a way to keep records. What was applied, GVU, soil conditions, so forth and so on. It's all going to be on one nice report and everything. That way you can kind of figure out. So I'll make one more comment in regards to tissue samples and plant monitoring kits. if you get one, do it to the full extent, regardless of what the year's looking like. There's still things to learn, even if it's a bad situation, where we got dry conditions, don't look so good, there's still things to learn. The data aspect of it is why we do soil samples, why we do tissue samples, or any other sampling as far as that goes. And I've had a comment here, had a conversation earlier in regards to the tools that we have to offer. You know, people that know us, yeah, we analyze soil. We do a lot of that, but we have a lot of other tools, and I encourage every one of you to think about the tools in a systematic approach. Now, I'm not up here trying to give you a big sales presentation. Yes, we're a lab. Whatever lab you use, go at it at a systematic approach, not just I got a problem, I got to figure it out. Yeah, that's the reason you want to do some testing, but to truly learn, once again, what's working, why not? If you're in a lot of different practices going on here, and there's a lot of opportunities. You know, if you're spreading lime, what kind of quality is the lime? If you're spreading chicken litter, any type of manure, what's the analysis? I mean, there's a lot of things that we need to know before we just do it, because when it comes to nutrition, balance is the key. So a couple of years ago, whenever we had fertilizer prices go through the roof, going into the nitrogen piece, I had a lot of questions. You know, how much can I cut back? How much can I cut back? My response is what have you done on a particular farm to learn what you've been doing and how it's been effective? And typically, you get into this time of year, get closer to that harvest time, doing what needs to be done in regards to nitrogen, figuring that out, kind of gets pushed to the backside, goes to the back burner. There's a tool called a corn stalk nitrate test. Everybody has probably done soil nitrate test, and that is a piece of it. And we do it early on to figure out what we need to apply. The corn stalk nitrate test is the other end. A couple weeks after black layer, you want to go to a field. Representation is key. You want to go from the 6-inch soil, from the soil, 6 inches up on that stalk. So that's 6 to 14 inch mark. So it's an 8-inch piece of stalk. You want to do about 12 to 15 pieces of stalk and send that to me. Now, what's that going to tell you? I can tell you, I'll give you a rating. We'll rate it. There's a chart we'll go by. But you want to have over 700 parts per million nitrate levels in that stalk in order to be optimal. At least that's minimum. Anything below that, we potentially had shortchanged ourselves in regards to nitrogen. Don't just take one to represent 100 acres. I mean, you know your farms. You know the wet areas. You know where the good and the bad is. And so make sure you take enough to get good representation. At the same time, you do that corn stalk nitrate test. You don't have to do this with soil nitrate, because it's one thing to measure what's in there in the stock, another thing to measure what's left in the soil. And then after you have a couple 2 or 3 years of different growing conditions, you know what you've applied. But if we don't know what's getting into that plant, once again, once we're riding that combine, we're making assumptions at that point. That's a good tool that hardly a small percentage of people utilize that tool. And it's about $7-8 to do that corn stalk nitrate test. It's pretty inexpensive. Now, as far as that soil side of it, you want to go 12 inches deep. You want to go 12 inches deep to get that soil nitrate test. Now, even if you're doing some pre-side dress stuff early in the season, everything you read is going to tell you to go 12 inches deep as well. There's nothing wrong with that. One of the things I like doing, and I prefer, because of when you're doing it and how big that plant is, I prefer doing a 0 to 6 and then a 6 to 12. And the reason I say that, depending on the form of nitrogen you're using specifically, if the majority of that nitrogen is at 6 to 12 inch mark, how much of that's going to get utilized by that plant as we continue getting rains and so forth? it just kind of helps in that thought process, how much more nitrogen did we need to put out there. Does that make sense? Anybody got any questions in regards to?
Except understand the minimum level, what level said you put too much nitrogen?
I think it's 1,000. I tell you what, write this down, watersag.com, watersag.com. If you go to our website, go to the facts tab, there's going to be a lot of literature there that's going to be helpful to you. And one of the things on there is a corn stalk nitrate test. It's going to tell you how to do it, when to do it, how much to send in, and so forth. And there's even a chart on that same, you can print it out as a PDF. There's a chart on there as well.
If they're gonna do that, say you got different, you go to a sandy field and a heavy clay field.
Absolutely. I would keep, soil types, wet natured areas of the farm, hill ground, keep all that separate. I mean, just so you can better make a determination as far as the plans going into the next year, especially if you're doing some variable rate nitrogen applications. That comes into play for that. I don't know how many people doing variable rate nitrogen applications. I know it's getting to be more of a hot topic, and a lot of times we're just looking at population and or yield, and that's a big part of it. But then if we have that data and everything in the back of our mind as well, maybe even be a part of how you're going to set up those zones and everything in order to create those variable rate application maps. But yes, keep them all set. The worst thing that we can do, the worst thing that you can do on like a pre-side rest test is take 10 and do an average. If you do an average of 10 samples on a farm, then you're not potentially going to be putting enough in some areas and way too much in others. I'd rather be on the high side, and I think everybody in this room feels the same way. I'd rather be on the high side, so I'm going to go with that bottom 20% or so. If I'm just going to do a flat rate across there. That makes sense. Yes, sir.
So if you're doing 4 stock tests, are you recommending then that each one of those 4 areas you're doing a soil nitrate test at the same time? And that's at black layer. Why have black layer not sometime during the season to see if your white crop is good?
Yeah, so good question. So in regards to the soil, you don't have to. I'm just saying, if we know what's in the plant, you might want to know what's left in the soil. A lot of that depends on what source did you use for your nitrogen and when was it applied, in order to kind of figure out what's left there. In regards to from the stock aspect of, what was the last part of that question again?
Black layer, you recommend?
Yeah. So black layer, about 2 weeks or so after black layer, because at that point in time, all the utilization of nutrients is done. I mean, that plant is done at that point in time. So nitrogen is very mobile into the plant. So if it's still in that bottom portion, it didn't get utilized and making growth. So that's the reason we want to do it after black layer. Anytime before that, we still won't be doing this regular tissue test, and that's going to be telling you, was there enough as far as nitrogen? Because one thing that we're doing and understanding, this is a nitrate form. We're doing a corn stalk nitrate. We're doing a nitrate form of nitrogen, okay? Not total nitrogen. Total nitrogen is what we're looking at when we do a regular leaf analysis. And so the nitrate, this is the only time that we'll recommend doing a nitrate test on plant, other than if you were cutting it for silage, for obvious reasons. If you're just looking at, I'm not going to get into it, but there's a newer tool that's kind of getting popular out there. It's a SAT test. I don't know if you've heard of it. If you haven't, question has been brought to me several times. Is it better than doing a tissue? Well, I don't. The problem on a corn is no one has it figured out yet, to my knowledge, as to how to understand the numbers. I can tell you that we're working with Murray State University, second year, doing some research on corn with SAT testing. I think it will be a viable tool at certain times of the year, just based upon the 1 year data that we do have. The big selling point that some companies have on that is it's an indicator,
week to 2 weeks prior to taking tissue, of course, what you're gonna have in it. That's true on some nutrients, but not all. And I'm not gonna get into it because once again, we're still doing the research and everything on it, but you know, you won't have the same numbers, but if that were true, you should see a trend together, right? And once again, on some nutrients we are. I do believe that, I will say this, I think that when it comes to sap testing, it's kind of like comparing soil and plants. You don't want to do one or the other, you got to have both of them. And I think that's kind of what we're going to be even with the sap part of things. But I do think the sap is probably going to be more useful later season, reproductive stages, especially on corn. So we're still trying to understand and figure out the numbers until we get to the point to where we feel confident in the numbers, and not confident in the numbers, but just confident in knowing how to use the numbers. That's not something that I'm promoting. We can do it if you got a means, or working with somebody that's got a means of using numbers. We're doing a lot of sap tests, especially down south on cotton and even soybeans. We're doing more on soybeans, but basically it's sap test because we're doing just that. We're squeezing the sap out of a certain portion of that plant. Most of the time on soybeans and cotton, it's out of patio. But I know we'll get off track there. Any questions? Yes.
On the total soil digester, what's that DNR number?
Yeah, so the ENR is the estimated nitrogen release. That's how much nitrogen is potentially, just a calculation. How much nitrogen is going to be available from the organic matter that's done on that. Can you deduct that amount from your total nitrogen? I would not advise that as far as 100% of it anyway. You may do a percentage, because here's the problem. You don't know exactly how much, but even more importantly, you don't know when. You don't know when that's going to release and be available. That's kind of the problem with that. I'm not saying you can't use it at all. It's useful, but I wouldn't do much more than 30, 40%.
In regards to the total digestive test, has that sped up any, the B crop test, and what's your suggestion on pulling it now? As far as timing?
Now is a great time to be pulling the B crop as far as for the DNA test. The speed on the B crop, it is a little bit faster. I'm hesitant in saying that because, you know, to me, fast is, you know, we're always been used to getting things turned around in 1 to 2 days. I mean, tissue, we're turning it around next day. Most soil, we're turning it around next day. Sometimes it's 2 days, depending on what time we get done during the evening and everything. But, you know, B crop, I say 4 to 6 weeks. And here's the big caveat when it comes to the B crop. And if you don't know what the B crop is that basically we're doing a DNA test of the soil. And so it's a true biological test. People will ask how that compares to like a soil health or a hanging test, which is a good tool as well. But with that test, we're still doing a chemistry test in order to indicate biology. With the B crop, we're actually doing a true DNA test. I feel like I don't want to say the hindrance, but there's 2 reasons that test is not just exploding like I thought it would. One is the cost, $235. It's not a cheap test. And it takes a while because it's true. That is a true biology test. We're using PCR just like you would on any type of DNA testing. A lot of good information in regards to that. The other problem that we have is within the industry, a lot of biological products out there, right? Some companies are doing a better job than others as far as the research, knowing how it works. But then, so the problem is once you get this test back from the results back from me, is I can tell you what your limiting factors are, but ask the hard questions to these companies when they're promoting, yes, my product will work here or my product will work there. Ask the hows and whys. If they know the hows and whys, they're doing their research. But my experience has been that a whole lot of knowing that how and why, and that's kind of the disconnect. I can tell you what you're lacking, but if you don't know what to apply, it'd be no different than if we knew nothing about fertilize. If I was telling you was lacking phosphorus, well, what product do I need to use? You're not gonna use potash if you need phosphorus, right? It's a similar conversation. But going back to the timing, the biggest problem we have as far as it takes such a period of time, and there's a lot of QCs involved in that. And if one QC fails, we start all over. So if everything runs smoothly, yes, you may have some friends that's done it and got them back in 2 or 3 weeks. And you may have some that's been 6 weeks and still broke. And it's not that we don't start it as soon as we get it, because we are.
You factored in on the disease portion, that's a nice little segment in that report. It's tar spot now added in. Have they put that in there so far?
Really soon. That's going to be there really soon. But that's what I got told last year. I'm not privy to that side of it, but yes.
I know there's a few guys in here, it's real big because they're up north as well. But in regards to pulling that, I know we're doing a lot of fungicide passes now. I know it would probably be best right before the pass, but how long after that pass?
Here's the thing, there's not been a lot of work in regards to that. It's one thing if it's been one application, but like in the tar spot areas, where there's been multiple application, that gets kind of hairy. But 2 to 3 weeks minimum after that application, and pretty much, I'm going to say that after any application, even around that application. In season is the best time. Right now is the prime time as far as time of year, temperature, soil conditions, everything else. Right now is a great time to be taking those. If you have a field right now that's soybeans and you submit that sample, if it's going into corn next year, submit it for corn. Because soybeans going to go. You're trying to learn something for next year's crop.
Should you do that every year? In every field?
You should be probably thinking, depending on what you're trying to learn. That's a good question. If you're looking at what's my problem, and I'm applying certain products at certain times, you're probably going to want to do 2 to 3 times in one season. Because as the season goes on, the fluctuation of the biology obviously changes. The applications is made changing with products being applied that's supposed to be increasing that biology. It's going to be changing. So you understand what I'm saying? I mean, it kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier in regards to depending on the product and that company knowing and kind of helping you with those decisions. One sample. If you were not looking at products or practices and just trying to learn, I would still do a minimum of 2 a year, one at the beginning of the season, one mid to late season, just to see how that changed throughout the course of the season. Question was asked in regards to fungicide. We got to have fungicide. I don't want you to think I'm anti-fungicide or anti-pesticides, because I'm not. But I think we have to understand that it does affect the biology. How much does it affect biology? I think that it's going to depend upon geography. I think it's going to, because every geography, every soil type has the needs of native species of that biology, of that bacteria, and that fungicide changes. And so there's no silver bullet here. And to say that even with what we have as far as our database, the database is continuing to grow as we do more samples, but no one has the biological piece of soil completely figured out. We're still learning. So going back to what you said, it depends on what you're trying to do. What am I trying to learn here as to how many do I need to take and when do I need to take them? As far as a baseline on a farm, I think right now it's a good time, as long as the fungicide application hasn't been made for the last couple of weeks. Good question. Anybody else?
I think the one thing I'd add to that is, if you guys haven't done it, I know there's a few here that's not been in the group very long. Just reach out to the rep for bee crop. They're very good about scheduling an appointment and talking through that, because it is extremely detailed. If you have not looked at the bee crop, it'll confuse you
That's correct. As I mentioned in regards to the SAP, the last thing we want to do is offer a service of any type and it be just a paper with numbers. We want it to be useful information. Obviously, the only thing that we can't really help with is this is a product you need to use. We don't get into products. We're an unbiased lab. We never have, never will get into recommending a specific product. And even if I would, I couldn't right now because of all the new products, and there's a lot of good products out there. But just happened to think about one comment that Kevin had made that I want to touch on in regards to like manganese. Manganese can be very helpful, but like every other nutrient, you want to be careful before you just go out there and apply manganese. One, what is your soil test? How much manganese is already in that plant? Because there is such a thing as manganese toxicity. And the last thing you want to do is go and something like that. And not to pick on manganese, just that kind of stood out to me. Gentleman back here in North Carolina, I don't know where you're at in North Carolina, but you go in the eastern part of North Carolina, where you get into some high organic matter soils and everything, and some lower pH issues, you can have some manganese toxicity. It's pretty common. But I feel like we feel that to say that. No, nothing else. They've done a really good job, or you folks are getting hungry.
Go back to your testing. If I send you a sample of lime from our local pit, you tell me
What now?
our local lime pit, if I send you a sample of their lime, you can tell me if it's good, bad, or otherwise.
I can, yes, absolutely. One thing, whenever you submit lime samples, make sure you tell me which state. The reason being is because every state has a different way of trying to figure out value. And so basically it just typically boils down to the seed test portion of that. I mean, but yes, I mean, we're gonna, and we can typically turn those around. I try to turn them around the same day, but 2 days at the max, we try to turn those lime tests around. And just in regards to that too. So if you don't know what you're doing, and I don't know laws in Michigan as far as how they do it. I don't know if there's anybody within state agency that's actually going around and testing it periodically, or if there's actually a minimum that it has to be as far as RMV. I know I'm being from Kentucky, it's buyer beware. I mean, there's no minimum. I mean, it can be 20% RMV. It can be the gravel that you put out on the parking lot and everything. But University of Kentucky goes out once in the fall, once in the spring, tries to get around to all the breweries, and then they post something on the website as to what the RMV was of that line. Now, I've seen it more than one time on a couple different queries where I know a guy that actually does it for one of the things he does for a living, spread line. And he happened to be there when the University of Kentucky was there, and he was taking his sample out of one pile and he was getting loaded out of another pile. Okay, so that kind of went through his mind, is there a difference? So he went and got a sample of both of them, and they were considerably different. I really don't think that there was any hoodoo going on. I don't think that there was anything dishonest about it. I think what we have to realize is lime is mined from soil. I think it depends on where they're at on that shelf. I think it depends on the equipment, which pressure it's going through. There's just a lot of factors there, right? And I'm not telling you to get every single load that you're going to have dump tested, but if you've got 2 or 3 different farms, get you a couple samples, just so you know, peace of mind, if nothing else. I mean, because like our lime recommendations are based upon an 80% RMV factor. If you've got 30 or 40 or even a 50% RMV, and then the next time you go pull the samples, it really hasn't moved. Why? It's not pH. You're going to be calling me, telling me my samples results are not right because a pH hasn't moved. Maybe even gone down. Well, that quality of lime just is not there. If it's 57 rocks going out there, it ain't going to do much either.
So with that being said, say like ours, 50,
Okay,
and your soil test called for a ton. Would you put 2 ton?
there's a formulation that I can give you to figure that out.
Because we can't move our.
Yeah, you don't just put 30% more. There's actually a formula that I can give you.
That's the thing, we run in the same area, so.
Yeah.
and we get our lime, it's supposed to be high cal lime.
We can be high calcium, but still have a low R&V.
Now that we've been in the program and pulling tissue samples and stuff, and now that we know what we know, our calcium levels are.
And we can't move.
And we've been spreading lime from this pit, so that's why I want to know.
That's a very good point. So let's talk about what kind of lime do we need real fast. On our soil report, there's a base saturation, right? And most people don't even look at that. And I use it for one important thing. I look at the base saturation on calcium and magnesium. In my area, we got high calcitic soils. And so since we have high calcitic soils, that means that my magnesium base saturation is going to be lower than what I want it to be. And what I want it to be as far as my base sat on my mag is 12 to 14%. So if I'm below 12% base saturation mag, I'm going to try to get dolomitic lime. Now, I can't get dolomitic lime. Yeah, you can. You're going to have to pay a little bit more as far as the hauling fee. But you're not going to get it locally unless somebody else already trucked it in. Why is that? Well, if my soils are high calcium, then dolomitic lime is not going to be mined in the area that I'm in. Does that make sense? I mean, it's the same way as far as if you lived in just a reverse, low calcium, high mag area. You're not going to you have a hard time getting calcitic lime because my soils are naturally high in mag, so you're probably going to be able to get dolomitic lime. Bottom line is pay a little bit for that haul bill, especially if you need mag, because the guys that have lower calcium, and if your pH is correct, you can use a gypsum type product. But if you are low in mag, we're limited as far as what sources we have to get enough magnesium. Dolomitic lime is the way to go with you're not going to correct it 100% in 1 year, but without outside dolomitic lime, what do you have? What other option do you have as far as fertilize to get magnesium? K-Mag, go see what K-Mag costs. It works great for people that are strip tilling and doing some manual things like that. But in regards to so magnesium, we're just very limited as far as sources we have. Keep in mind, so calcium, I mentioned what I want my base saturation to be on mag, but I want my base saturation on calcium to be at 68 to 72%. It's kind of where I like my calcium to be. I will say, I'm hesitant saying this, but I made a comment about calcium affecting boron. I have seen in parts of southern Indiana, I had a friend of mine who's doing a lot of plant monitoring kits, and we were sitting down and discussing those. And he had one particular farm that boron on corn, I mean, especially late season, was phenomenal. I mean, phenomenal. And what we come to the conclusion to, that particular farm had a 60% RMV on calcium. And I really feel like that was the reason. And he didn't apply it for he didn't apply one pound of boron, dry, liquid, foliar, anything. It was the best boron readings that he had on all his crops. They put tissue samples on. But that was the common denominator. Now, I'm not sitting there saying to go, drop your base saturation on calcium. We just got to figure. I think we got to get a little. I think we need to do a lot more investigating in regards to products and time we're applying them, where we're applying them in regards to that plant, how they can get it up. You know, the corn, boron is a huge discussion, and rightfully so. But I think in order for us to get things figured out on our farm, I think we got to start doing a little bit of research and think outside the box as far as that application, time of application, ways to get it applied. One last thing that I will say, I think this is the most important thing. I mentioned a lot of tools. I mean, there's a lot more tools that I haven't even mentioned. And I would encourage you to get a systematic approach with those tools. Think of it like a large toolbox. What tools do you really need on your farm to make it, to go forward and everything? With groups like this, you're trying to figure out a plan. And that's important. Implement the plan, follow through, and finish. And then take those tools that you use as far as from Waters Lab or whatever lab you're using, and figure out what worked and what didn't. And ask the hard questions to your suppliers and everything. Ask the hard questions. That's all I got. Any more questions? No? All right. Do it.
Jordan, would you like to do that? Talk about your new plant?
All right, hey guys, I'm Jordan Miller. Am I too loud?
You're okay.
Good, okay. Or can you hear me like this?
No.
Use this,
not
okay.
over.
All right. I'm with BASF and I cover Southwest Indiana. I've been with them since 2010, and walking in today, Terry said, well, we might get you up there to say something. And I'm like, okay, all right. So just a quick update. You guys probably have heard of Veltima and Revitech. Those are BASF's newest fungicides on the market. We do have a new fungicide coming, Revilock. Revilock is Revisol, which is the AI in Revitech and Veltima, plus it's Arzemium. So pretty much if you have used Revitech, what we've done is we've taken out the headline and we've increased the AIs of the other two fungicides in there. Revilock is really going to be positioned in the south where we have heavy disease pressure. So it will not have our plant health benefits outside of disease like what you get with the headline products that's in Veltima and Revitech. So if you're using a Veltima or Revitech, I wouldn't replace it with Revilock. But if you're looking for additional or a second pass just for disease, this product is going to be a really good fit for you. We've mentioned tar spot up north. Veltima is excellent on tar spot. A lot of guys are doing Veltima followed by Veltima. If you're looking at doing two passes, a Veltima followed by Revilock would be a really good one. It is going to be labeled for both corn and soybeans. So if you are a soybean grower and you're looking at doing two passes of fungicide, but you don't want that second pass to keep your beans green, Revilock is going to also be a really great fit as that second pass as well. So that's an update there. We also have a new corn residual coming. It is going to be called Certain, and keep a lookout for that. It's a group 14 and a group 15. It's going to be a new use pattern for group 14s in corn. It's going to be pre up to V3 post. And if you're in an area right now that has HPPD resistance, this is an option for you where we're not relying on that group 27. So it's a really great fit if you have water hemp pressure, palm amaranth, giant rag, grasses, and again, it's just a residual. So perfect for if you're working your ground, but if you are doing some no-till or if you need to clean up something, it's really compatible with all different products. You can throw some, dicamba in there or meso or whatever. The other really nice thing is that it is very compatible with UAN and ATS if any of you guys are doing kind of a weed and feed type of program. So, and then if you guys do have any questions about, chemicals, feel free to ask, or herbicides or fungicides. Olivo is underneath the BSF umbrella now. So like I say, there's been several comments today that I can give you my 2 cents on from what we've seen in the industry and kind of what manufacturers have responded back. So if you guys want me to expand on any of that, I certainly can. I think there was a gentleman in the back asked about residuals and maybe burning and drawstring on soybeans and whether or not, you see any sort of yield loss from that. And kind of like what Kevin said, we typically don't see a yield loss as long as it's early on. It obviously depends what product you're using and what stage your soybeans are in. You're going to get drawstring from a group 15, which would be, your warrants, dual, Zidua, those type of residual products. We don't see any sort of yield loss with that drawstring. You still have the same surface area there, and so you're still able to photosynthesize. It's just, on a little smaller area. Obviously, if we're burning our beans, late, you're going to lose a little bit there. It just really depends on how much of that bean you've burnt. But yeah, if you're in an area where weeds are going to hinder your yield, then obviously, if you're using a combination of things, a little bit burn is probably going to outweigh what those weeds could do to you. And then I think it was Nick, you asked maybe about, using herbicides in the burn down situation or maybe early post on soybeans and then kind of being slow. So we do know that anytime we are putting a herbicide down, whether it's corn or soybeans, but we see it more so in soy, is that plant has to metabolize them. And so it does take that plant a little bit longer to metabolize the herbicide, and that's where we maybe see the slow growth there. Again, we, as an industry, we don't see any yield response from that as long as you're using the correct rates and labeled products. But we have seen where it does kind of just take a little bit to get going. Anything else I can touch on for you guys? Any questions? Terry, is that what you were?
Hey, I just had questions. Jordan, be a good one. Questions?
How important is pH of water you're spraying?
So the question was, how important is the pH of your water when you're spraying Veltima? And as long as if there's any other products in there, obviously we need to make sure, that they're good with the pH, but Veltima doesn't really, it can be low or high or neutral. It doesn't matter too much. It doesn't affect how well it's going to control the disease. Yeah, so you should be fine wherever you're at there. Yeah.
Time of the day, mid-afternoon and the hot heat, stress of the day, does that make a difference versus early morning, late evening, as far as fungicide effect?
Yeah, so the question was timing of day, early morning versus later, spraying a fungicide. I'll say we've done some research on soybeans, and actually it seems like we had a little bit better response when it was earlier and there was maybe a little bit of dew yet out there. Later in the day, depending on application method, we just have to be careful. Obviously, if it's super hot, you don't want any of your product to, I want to say vaporize. Volatile, yeah, thank you. And so, a lot of people will add labeled adjuvants or whatnot, especially if it's like out of a plate or something to help with that. But no, typically, even if it's later in the day and it's really hot, we still see where the fungicides are going to do a good job. And there are other products that, where they claim you can use them and it helps the fungicide to actually get onto the plant and spread, and, you know, it creates like a depot for it. So it just kind of depends on who your supplier is and if they are promoting one of those or not. That answer? But yeah, I'd say if I had to choose, I would probably do earlier in the day, especially on soybeans.
Any products you would recommend to add with Veltima? Or spraying with a drone? Like your adjuvants?
Sure. So the question was, do I recommend adding any adjuvants with Veltima, specifically with a drone? And BSF is still doing a lot of research with drones. You know, it's obviously newer. The biggest thing is just to make sure if you're adding an adjuvant that it is labeled, number one, you know, for over corn. You want to see your timing too, right? Because certain adjuvants have a component called NPE. And so if it has NPE in there, we don't want to be spraying it because it could cause arrested ear. So as long as your adjuvant is labeled for over corn, then, you know, we're good with it. Again, it just kind of depends on who your supplier is. Winfield has an adjuvant master lock, you know, that they like to add to it, that they say helps. Nutrient has franchise. So like I say, it depends on, you know, if you're a Van Diest guy or Rosen's, everyone has one. I would say, you know, just check with them. And BSF has done a bunch of research. So if there's a specific one that you're curious about, I can, you know, reach out to our tech team.
Our group can answer that question.
Yeah, there's a lot. So thank you.
They're discussing it among themselves.
Looks like so you guys want to just go around and each other? Yeah.